We often think of genius as some kind of magical spark, something you're just born with. But what if it's not? What if it's a system, a method so intense, so radical, that it could take someone from their absolute lowest point and have them change the entire world? Today, we are cracking open the secret operating system of one of history's most incredible minds, Nikola Tesla. And you know what? It didn't start in a pristine laboratory. It started in a ditch. In 1884, penniless and disillusioned, the man who would electrify the world was forced to dig ditches for a living. That physical collapse was the forge for his greatest intellectual system. Just let that sink in for a second. The man whose mind was crackling with ideas about alternating currents and wireless power was literally digging ditches. Can you imagine the humiliation? This wasn't just a bad job, it was a total rejection by the world he was trying to build. But this moment of failure, this is where our story really kicks off. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a whole new philosophy. All right, so how are we going to unpack a mind like Tesla's? Here's the game plan. We're going to start right where he did, in the ashes, with the ditch. Then we'll see how he built the mind's fortress and really get why he needed that radical isolation. After that, we dive into the core of it all, the blueprint for genius, his actual method. Then we'll see how he lived it, day in and day out, with his rituals of obsessive isolation. Of course, we have to see the results in electrifying the world. And finally, we'll bring it all back home and talk about the fire within you, the real lesson we can take from his unbelievable life. Okay, so let's jump back to that ditch. Section 1, from ashes. See, this is so important because a moment like that can either shatter you or it can forge you into something stronger. For Tesla, it was definitely the second one. This wasn't about him being crushed. It was about him building an entirely new operating system for his brain. It was a complete rejection of the outside world, a turn inward to the only thing he knew he could truly control. And this is where you start to see the brilliance of his thinking. For you or me, digging a ditch for $2 a day is rock bottom. It's failure, period. But Tesla, he completely flipped the script. That ditch, it became his lab. Think about it. The hard, repetitive work actually silenced all the noise. The critics, the investors who betrayed him, all of it just faded away. So this wasn't a punishment. It was this period of forced, solitary mental work. He was finally free from the chaos that had been holding him back. And right there, in that moment of clarity, the Tesla method was born. It's this simple, powerful idea, a systematic rejection of the outside world in favor of the absolute certainty of his own mind. He looked at all the evidence from his own life and came to a stunning conclusion. The external world, with all its messiness and broken promises, was the problem. The only tool he could rely on, the only thing he could perfect, was his own mind. And that became his guiding star for everything else he would ever do. So you have to wonder, right? How does a person arrive at such an extreme conclusion? Well, that brings us to our second section, forging the mind's fortress. We need to understand the chaos that made his isolation feel, to him, completely justified. This wasn't a philosophy he just cooked up out of nowhere. It was the result of a lifetime of experiences that screamed one thing at him: the outside world is unreliable. For Tesla, isolation wasn't a preference, it was a necessity.
His whole life was like a series of brutal lessons. It started when he was just a kid. He was plagued by these intense, uncontrollable flashes of light and images in his mind. He had to learn to master his own chaotic inner world before he could do anything else. Then, when he started his career, he was cheated time and time again by investors. And of course, there was his infamous conflict with Thomas Edison. That taught him that collaboration, at least for him, just led to compromise and inefficiency. So the data was in. The conclusion was crystal clear. The only thing he could trust was his own mind, if he could just get it in order.
This chart really just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's the central conflict of his life. On one side, you've got the external world, chaos, betrayal, inefficiency, and watered-down ideas. And on the other, his internal world, order, certainty, total control, and pure invention. He saw this choice, and he didn't just pick a side. He engineered his entire life to live on the right side of this chart as much as humanly possible. All right, this brings us right to the heart of it all. Section 3, the blueprint for genius. We've talked about the why behind his isolation. Now we're going to break down the how. You'll probably hear my tone shift a little here because we're moving from the story of his life to the technical manual for his brain. This is the actual operating system he used. The entire system is built on one core belief, and it's so simple but so powerful. The mind is the ultimate laboratory.
For Tesla, the normal way of inventing things, building physical models, running endless tests, managing big teams, that wasn't just slow, it was messy. It introduced errors. Think about all the wasted material, the time, the arguments. He saw that all as noise that got in the way of the pure idea. For him, the real work, the important work, happened right inside his own head, in that perfectly silent, controlled environment.
So, how did he actually do it? Well, he built his method on these 3 pillars. Number 1, the visualization perfection mandate. This meant he had to build, test, and completely debug every single invention in his imagination before he even touched a single tool. Number 2, the anti-intervention protocol. This was a strict rule, no outside input during the creative process. To him, other people's opinions weren't helpful collaboration, they were a contamination of the idea. And third, the energy and frugality doctrine. This was all about protecting his mental energy and focus like it was gold.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, Rituals of Obsessive Isolation. Because, let's be real, a philosophy is just a bunch of nice words if you don't actually live it. So now we're going to look at the specific daily habits and routines Tesla used to enforce this method every single day. This is where the theory becomes reality. The absolute cornerstone of his daily practice was what you could call internal prototyping. And this wasn't just daydreaming, it was a disciplined, mandatory system. He would lock himself away for hours, often in a dark room, and mentally build his machines. He'd run them, see where they'd break, and fix them, all in his head. While Edison was famously burning through thousands of physical filaments to find one that worked, Tesla was running thousands of simulations in his mind. So when he finally built the real thing, it was crazy fast and it almost always worked perfectly the first time. Why? Because he'd already fixed all the bugs in his mental lab. And this discipline, it went beyond just his work. It went into his very body. Look at this number, 3. For huge chunks of his life, that is how many hours Tesla trained himself to sleep a night. Now, obviously, we are not suggesting you do this, but it is an absolutely shocking testament to his commitment. For him, sleep was just wasted time. It was inefficiency. He was in a battle to optimize every single second of his life to get more time in that ultimate laboratory, his mind. But it wasn't all just about grinding himself down. He also knew he needed to recover strategically. One of his most important rituals was his daily walk. And this wasn't some casual stroll. No, this was another tool. The walk was his time for mental decompression. It was a way to let the big problems sort of simmer in his subconscious, something that modern science is telling us is incredibly important. It was the perfect rhythm, intense, deep focus, then a period of letting go, and then right back into focus. So, after all this obsessive work, all this isolation, what was the result? That brings us to Section 5, electrifying the world. And my tone is shifting here because the triumphs are just awe-inspiring. But we're also going to see the tragic flaw that was baked right into the very same method. The legacy of the Tesla method is, and this is not an exaggeration, the modern world as we know it. The AC power grid that lights up our cities and powers our homes, that was built and perfected in his mind first. His early work on robotics, radio, wireless communication, he laid the foundation for technologies we literally can't live without today. This is the ultimate proof that the method worked. It took a penniless guy digging a ditch and turned him into one of the most important inventors in human history. But here's where we get to the tragic irony of his life. It was a perfect method for pure invention, but it had a fatal flaw when it came to business. That same isolation that protected his ideas, that anti-intervention protocol, it left him totally vulnerable in the real world. He was a master inside his own head, but he was a complete novice in a boardroom. He couldn't protect his inventions, he couldn't monetize them, because that would require the very thing his system was designed to avoid, dealing with other people. And that brings us to our final section, and honestly, the most important one for us right now. Section 6, the fire within you. We've gone through his life, we've broken down his system. So now, what's the lesson? What's the direct, actionable takeaway for you and me? If there is one crucial lesson to pull from this entire story, it's this. Your mind is the ultimate laboratory. And in our world today, distraction is the absolute enemy of genius. We live in a world of constant notifications, endless meetings, and this myth that we have to be collaborating all the time. Tesla's life is this powerful, radical reminder that sometimes the most important work, the real breakthroughs, require having the courage to just step away from it all. So here's the call to action. Here's how you can actually use this. Try adopting his internal prototyping protocol. The next time you have a big project, before you do anything, just stop. Carve out some quiet, isolated time and visualize the entire thing from start to finish. Run through it. Find the weak spots. Fix the flaws. Do it all in the laboratory of your mind. Build it perfectly in there first.
When you really boil it all down, Nikola Tesla built the future on one single truth. The highest form of invention is intellectual. The Tesla method was his system for taking all the chaos and hardship of his life and turning it into a fortress of focus. He proved that obsessive isolation, when you use it with discipline, can literally build the future.
And so we end on this, the one lesson that was forged in a ditch over 100 years ago, but is maybe more relevant now than ever before. Protect your mind. It is the ultimate source of power.